Previously on the podcast, we've spoken about how to get into the wedding industry space and to be your own boss, if indeed that is one of your own aspirations. Now, I've noticed that one of the things that we didn't discuss is how sales skills can help you to find financiers. Because there are some people who want to get into the industry and they're not willing to bootstrap, because how I did it and a couple of other people did it was the bootstrapping method. So you have some coins here and there, you save up, you buy your first camera like I did, or if you're a decor person, you save up some of your salary, and then you buy some of the drapes or tables or whatever, or you start by renting before you buy your own inventory. So there are people who have started with the bootstrapping route, but not everybody is a fan of that. And I believe, I think 2 podcast episodes back, I shared the experience of a friend of mine who decided to go the financing route. That's to get loans from friends and family members to set up his own business, and how that didn't end too well. I guess that was just my own cautionary tale about how we ought to be careful with managing expectations when we take loans or other forms of finance because we want to get into the wedding event space. So, if you're not going to bootstrap, then obviously you are going to seek for funds. And since the previous episodes, so excuse me, sorry about that. I have a cold again, as usual. That's one of the downsides of having kids, because they run off to school, they play with other kids, they get a cold, they come home, and then they give the cold to you. Anyway, which is not to say that if you don't have kids right now, you shouldn't look forward to it. It's fun and just part of the adventures of being a parent. Okay, so previous episodes we looked at setting the right expectations, and that is exactly how sales skills are going to come in handy. Because if you remember correctly, if you've been listening for a while, the right expectations to set or to glean when you're talking with your investors, your potential investors, are to figure out what the total amount is, to figure out what the purpose of the purpose of the payment is, like what's the money going to be used for. Because if your investors want you to get into the wedding space, but they think that wedding photography is going to be a much more profitable venture, and they think that that's what they're dropping money for, then we can reasonably expect that they're going to be surprised and maybe angry if they find out that you took those funds and you decide to change your mind last minute and become a wedding decor person instead, or a videographer. That's one of the things that is going to cause a tiff between you and your financiers. So the amount, the purpose, what we're going to use that money for, the tenor or the payment period. Are you guys going to pay back after 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And then the whole thing about interest. Even if you don't discuss interest, it's reasonable to expect that except if it's your mom or your dad giving you the money, it's reasonable to expect that your cousins, your aunties, your uncles are probably expecting a little bit of kickback. So if they drop 2M for you and you pay back after a year, you'll be on, probably expecting something, 1.5 or whatever. Anyway, but bottom line is, have those conversations and don't just leave it on that fuzzy level of, okay, I'm handing you this 1 million, make sure you do me well and bring something back in return. You have to be very clear on what that something in return is, even if you don't get to a specific figure, because after all, you're speaking to friends, family, and associates. You need to have a rough ballpark. All right. So this is how sales skills are going to come in handy in the whole in this whole thing. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you remember that we've been going on and on about qualifications and discovery. Now, the idea behind qualifications is to make sure that you're speaking to the right person and there's a need and both our expectations match. And discovery is all about getting into the root of the problem to find basically what's at the bottom of everybody's heart, that key thing that they're going for. Now, if we go through qualification and discovery processes, then we're going to arrive at the core root of what everybody's expectation is. So basically, if you take sales skills into this whole thing, when talking about the amount, the purpose, the tenure of payment, and how much interest is going to be paid, then you should be just fine, because you'll have all the cards on the table. I mean, reasonably speaking, because we cannot anticipate macroeconomic events, things going south. What else? Accidents that happen here and there. So we can't anticipate everything, but reasonably, we'll have all the core things on the table. So, with that in mind, and knowing now from listening to the podcast that sales is a question driven process, you need to ask lots of open ended questions around why now. So, uncle, auntie, why are you coming forward now? Why are you looking to throw money around somewhere? As in, why now? You also need to ask questions about why the wedding industry. Because remember, I told you, for some reason, our relatives just think that once you become a wedding photographer, videographer, planner, or a decor person, they basically just believe that we pluck millions out of out of the sky, or pluck millions from trees, or whatever. And so that's one of the reasons why they want to drop some cash, because they think if I put down some of this money, it's going to start raining millions, and I should get a cut of the millions as well. So we need to be clear and find out why the wedding industry. Then, of course, we need the conversations around how much, because it's not unusual for family members to say, let me support you in this venture. I'm going to drop 500K. And then, maybe later on, they now say, okay, I want to drop an additional 250 or whatever. But we need to have a strong idea about, we need to have a loose idea about what the ultimate haul is, how much that they want to throw into the business. We also need to ask open-ended questions about what kind of returns that they are expecting. So, okay, uncle, thank you very much. You want to give me 100K to start this wedding planning business. So, I know you're trying to help me because you and Popsy are friends, but, I feel somehow if I take this money and, I don't bring anything back on top when I'm giving you back. So, anyway, I guess this is a touchy one if you're dealing with a direct uncle, but you need to find a way of initiating that conversation so that you can get a sense of what kind of returns that he's looking for. So, is he giving you 100K and expecting 120K back next month or next week, next year? We need to ask those open-ended questions. You also need to, with great care and delicacy, if you're dealing with close family members, we need to find out what the investment source is, because ideally it will be good for people to invest their money out of their discretionary income. That is money that they can afford to lose. So in other words, if your uncle or your auntie is giving you 100K or 500K, ideally it would be nice if she's dropping that excuse me, it would be nice if she's dropping that 500K out of money that she can afford to lose, so that if things go south and you can only return 500K, she's not going to be left in a bind because she can't pay medical bills or she can't pay her children's school fees. So it's not for her own education per se, your uncle or auntie's education, but it's more for your own protection. Because if it looks as if this money is not coming out of discretionary income, but it's coming out of money that they use for their day to day, then I would advise that you don't take this money, because even if they said, I'm giving you this 500K for 1 year, it's possible that if personal circumstances change, they might be back in 8 months to say, you know what, that 500K that I gave you for 1 year, how far? Things are tight, hospital bills, I need my money back. In fact, at a sales training that I just did for a real estate agency recently, well, yesterday actually, that's Kairos Real Estate based out of Abuja. We did sales training through my partners, Etiquette with Eti. So we handled the sales training for them, and it was one of the scenarios that we discussed. A real life client who dropped money. Everybody thought everything was cool, only for her to come back to say, you know what, circumstances have changed. So for that 1M that I dropped as a down payment on this, I need my money back. And it was one of the scenarios that we ran through from a sales perspective and also from a business policy perspective about how to address those sorts of things. So these things do happen, not just in the wedding industry, but like I've given you this real estate example, it happens all the time. So if you get a sense that your uncle is dropping this money out of discretionary income, or your aunt is dropping this money out of discretionary income, then that's cool. If it's Popsy that is dropping the money, or your mom, and everything seems cool, then no wahala. It might be a good bet, because if things run south, the negative fallout might not be too much or might be easier to manage. But if you get a sense that it's coming out of normal income, living income, then I think it's something that we ought to run away from. Now, the whole point of asking all these open-ended questions is not for the education of the financier. It's not to educate your aunt, it's not to educate your uncle, but it's about you. Because once you go through this whole process and you get a sense of what the expectations are, you get good answers to those questions, you now know clearly whether you can meet these expectations or not. So, if the summary of the conversation is they want to do it now because they love you, they want to support you, and they have some spare income, they think that the wedding industry is making really good returns and growing, they want to drop 1 million and they expect 50% back on the money, and the term is going to be 1 year. So now you know that they're going to give you 1M and they expect 1.5M back next year. So it's left for you now to look at yourself, run your own math, and then think, is it possible for me to get those kind of to bring in enough business on that basis to be able to turn this 1M to 1.5 so I can pay them back next year and we can all remain good friends and family members. So if the answer is yes, then the next step is simple. You need to put everything down in writing. Not necessarily because it's going to form as a binding contract, but because once it's in writing, there's something you can refer to about the expectations and the terms on which you guys entered into this agreement. That's really important. And then the final thing, you have to come up with a sales and marketing plan. If you're coming into the wedding space, you want to be a photographer, videographer, event planner, you need to come up with some sort of a sales and marketing plan. That if I'm going to shoot a wedding at 400k, expenses are going to be 300k. I'm going to put 100k in my pocket, and that leaves me with 100k. And that means if I'm going to be able to pay uncle back, if I'm going to be able to pay my aunt back at the end of a year, that means I have to have shot 15 weddings by this time next year at 100k leftover. That's going to give me my 1.5. So you need to sit down and come up with that plan. So I know that it's going to have to be 15 weddings with 100k on top after I've paid all the expenses for the books, for the frames, for the second shooter, transportation, credit, internet, everything, and then I put 100k in my own pocket for profit, and there's 100 that is left over. Oh yeah, of course, your taxes, because AMAC will come to harass you. That's the Abuja Municipal Council. For those of us who are Abuja based, in Lagos, you're going to have the local authorities that will come harass you as well. And then, apart from that, you are expected to fulfill your responsibilities to the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the IRS, FIRS, or the Lagos Inland Revenue Service if you are based out of Lagos. So we have to meet our tax obligations as well. So yeah, you're going to have to come up with that plan. I'm going to have to shoot 15 weddings, and then you also have to ask yourself the hard question: where am I going to find these brides and grooms so that I can cover their weddings? So you see now that even if you want to bootstrap because you think it's going to make your life a whole lot more easier, because you don't have to you don't want to bootstrap because you think running around and getting financiers is going to help you run away from the sales equation. You see that you come right back to it at the end of the day. You need the sales skills to be able to figure out whether you can enter into this loan, this finance arrangement with this financier that you're speaking to. And then you'll find out that to get out of it, you still have to use sales skills and come out of it at the end of the day, because you need a sales and marketing plan to find those brides and grooms, those clients that you're going to have to service to be able to get the profits in the first place. So, whether we like it or not, we're not running away from the sales question, whether we decide to bootstrap or whether we decide to use financiers. The only difference is those of us who decide to bootstrap, we just go head on and face that sales question a whole lot easier than those of you who seek financing. But seeking financing is a valuable option, and I think that this is a rough and ready way that you can get into these sorts of arrangements if you are seeking finance. So thank you very much. So thank you very much for listening to the sales for the Nigerian wedding industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional, Tavishima Ayede. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.